Okay, everybody. My husband and I accidentally joined a cult. I mean, it just happened. It's like it was a few years ago when we kind of got caught up in it. He wanted to go to med school, and we were naive. We'd just gotten married, and I didn't want him to get all this student loan debt, and like I have. And so he made this deal with this organization, and they would pay for him to go to med school, and he would do 4 years of service, and it was a contract, binding legal contract with this. Essentially, it's a cult, I feel, at this point. And med school didn't work out. And so after it didn't work out, we were just in this like place of uncertainty for 2 years of like, because he dropped out at the end of his first year, which is probably for the best. I mean, let's face it, I don't like doctors, I don't like pharmaceuticals. We would argue a lot about the propaganda that was being fed to him in med school. Everyone's a disease, be objective, they're not humans, blah, blah, blah. So it was meant to be, but then he just had this contract, pesky contract, looming over his head, and this organization had paid for a complete year of tuition for him, and so they gave him an option. You can either pay us the $75,000 that you owe us, or you can fulfill the original contract now. And of course, he was a cab driver at that time after he dropped out. So we were like, okay, um, let's just do the 4 years, right? It'll still be a steady paycheck, and free medical care, and a future possible career. So, yeah, but then it took them 2.5 years to figure out what they wanted to do with him. So for 2.5 years, he had this contract hanging over his head and couldn't get a really good job because, well, everyone knew that he could leave at any moment for this cult. Well, anyway, so finally they found a place for him using some of the education he had received in a more administrative way, which seems fine, you know? I mean, the cults, yeah, so he gave up a lot of his freedoms, sure, but it seemed like a really good deal, especially coming from a place with putting groceries on credit cards for 2 years and coming this close to being homeless. Thanks, family, for really supporting us in that empty, paid for house and not trying to rush us out of it at all. So we went for it. And they paid for our move. We don't even have to live on the compound necessarily, which I thought that was good. Uh, yeah, he had to go on the compound, of course, every day, and he's not really allowed to leave town or anything. I mean, he has to ask permission. Of course, that's when he was here. Eventually, after a couple months, the cult took him away. He's across the world now on a different compound. It's surrounded by barbed wire, and he's not really allowed to leave, but he wouldn't want to leave anyway. I mean, let's face it, the world outside of the cult isn't safe. I mean, a lot of spouses of cult members like me here in this compound area, they don't even want to leave the compound because they're so afraid of the outside world. Me, I tend to be a little bit the opposite. I'm more afraid to go on the compound, where speeding is not a suggestion. Cell phone use while driving can, well, I don't know, end you up in some sort of center where they, I don't know, re-educate you or something. I didn't realize that I was signing up for the cult too until like he was already in it, and then I started getting orders. Like, I don't know, I guess when they decided to take him away, they ordered me to go to this meeting and give up my personal information for support purposes, of course. I mean, just in case I get sad that he's been taken from me. And it's for a good mission. I mean, they're trying to spread this cult ideal around the world, and It's important. So anyway, this group that I'm in for spouses of cult members, they monitor my Facebook, monitor my YouTube. They check up on me, they call in and ask me how I'm doing. And if I want to leave town, I have to fill out a special form and tell them where I'm going and how to contact me. And they may or may not approve that based on my husband and where he is in the other compound. And I guess I can deal with all of that. But then I started to realize that not living on the compound itself isn't really allowing me as much freedom and privacy as I thought it would, because the whole town is run by this compound, this cult, the cult. Every single person that I've met in this town is either directly in the cult or is a spouse or immediate family member of the cult. And it's weird because you never know the position that that person's in. If they're one of my husband's cult superiors, then everything I say matters. Everything I do matters. And the cult isn't under regular law, like the Department of Justice. They have their own laws, kind of like Vatican City. But, yeah, it's some other acronym with 4 letters instead of 3. So if you do something wrong in the cult, it's not like you get the same due process that people who aren't in the cult get. You could be detained, indefinitely put into a solitary, confined space for a long time. I knew one guy that got caught drinking and driving, and he had to deal with the regular justice system, and then he also had to deal with the cult on top of that. And they spent a lot of time re-educating him about drugs and alcohol and, and how it's really bad. And I noticed that when my husband is being talked to by cult leaders, it's kind of twisted the way they talk about things. Like, they would say things like, "Are you sure you're not going to be heartbroken if we don't send you away?" And it's this weird thing where when everyone's at the cult compound, they all act like they really, really want to get sent away to this international cult compound. But then everybody knows once they get there, they get really depressed. So why are they all pretending like it's this great thing? What else is really weird is every single female spouse of a cult member that I've met just about in this town is pregnant. It's kind of creepy. I mean, even I got pregnant, and we tried for 2.5 years. And we moved here, and I got pregnant, and everywhere I look, there's pregnant women. And the cult, they give me free medical care, which is really great. But they won't pay for me to have care off the compound to have my baby. Only if I go on the compound will they pay for it. And that would mean that they would have the right to my placenta after the baby's born, and it would probably get sold to a third-party company. And we all know that overseas there are a lot of companies that are, claiming that they are cloning humans and they're getting their materials from donors. I can't help but wonder what would happen to my placenta if I gave birth on the compound. I mean, it's illegal for them to burn it in the furnace, and so they sell it to these people. Just like the PKU test, I mean, really, I could get tested and my husband could get tested to see if we're carriers, but no, they have to test the baby and get a sample of the baby's blood once the baby's born, and then they keep it on file for further testing and research. I don't really know why. I don't know if it has anything to do with the cloning of these other companies, but I don't know, I wonder. So everything I say is being watched. Everything I write, every post I share on Facebook is being monitored by these support groups. And I know it's just because they're really concerned about my mental health, because in this cult, there's a huge issue with people getting depressed. I mean, suicide's off the charts in this cult right now. And they don't really want the cult members to commit suicide. And so I guess the way they handle that is they just monitor them even more closely. You know, emails, phone calls, Facebook posts, that sort of thing. Nothing's private in this cult. Anyway, so I feel a little disconnected from the outside world. And if I go and get therapy on the compound, it would be totally free, but it wouldn't be private, and it would probably affect my husband's cult career. If I got therapy off the compound, they would still pay for it, of course, but they would just see on the claim that I was getting therapy, and it's important for them to know what I'm thinking and feeling, you know? So here I am. We thought my husband was going to go to medical school for free, but now he's across the world. And where he is, soldiers, you know, of the cult, they get upset, and sometimes they get sexually assaulted, you know, because this compound that they're at, there's other cult members from the international cult that kind of work together. And some of these other cult members have different cultures than our cult members, and so it's normal to rape men and boys and goats even. And of course, the cult members from our cult, they're not really allowed to do anything to stop these other international cult members, even though here it would be considered really bad. And so I just have to hope and pray that he comes back. He can serve out his contract. And then we can break our ties eventually. But you know, the catch is, of course, they're going to offer lifelong medical care, you know, especially if he gets injured, which is really nice, except it's kind of like a lifelong way to tap into urine and blood, mental health, which is basically our thoughts. I mean, let's face it. And the cult has a right to know our thoughts, right? Anyone that pays your bills is allowed to know everything you think, and everything you think affects your cult career. So here we are, we're in a cult. And if you know anyone in this Killeen, Texas area who's not associated with this cult at all, you know, spouse or immediate family or direct relation, have them get in touch with me, because, I don't know, I'd like a little perspective on how other people feel, you know, non-cult people. People that I don't know if they exist here. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. I just hope no one from the cult watches this. And I hope it doesn't negatively affect my husband. Because let's face it, it might.